If you picture a woman giving birth, you probably picture her lying down in a bed. That image feels timeless, like it's simply how birth has always worked. It's one of those assumptions so deeply embedded that it barely registers as an assumption at all. Surely this is just what a human body does, and always has done. For most of human history, across nearly every culture on Earth, it wasn't. Women stood, they knelt, they squatted, and the reason we switched away from that has surprisingly little to do with medicine. Start in ancient Egypt around 1700 BC. In 2001, archaeologists working at a site called Abydos uncovered something that had only ever been known from ancient texts: an actual birth brick. It's a decorated mud brick, one of a pair, that a woman would stand on with her feet while squatting to deliver her baby, her weight supported between the two bricks as gravity did part of the work. The brick recovered at Abydos is painted with a scene of a mother and newborn surrounded by attendants and the goddess Hathor, protector of childbirth. Egyptian medicine took the whole subject of women's health seriously, well beyond the moment of birth itself. Surviving medical papyri, including the Kahun and Ebers papyri, describe fertility tests, early pregnancy tests using grain germination, and remedies for complications, alongside protective amulets and incantations meant to call on divine help. Most women gave birth on the cool roof of the house or in a temporary pavilion built from papyrus stalks and vines, specifically constructed for the occasion rather than in an ordinary bedroom. Egyptian medical texts describe an entire support system built around the squatting position. A midwife positioned in front to help guide the baby, other women stationed on either side to hold the mother's hands and offer encouragement, sometimes even a dish of hot water tucked beneath a birthing chair, so the rising steam could help ease the delivery. This wasn't unique to Egypt. Birthing chairs and stools, typically fitted with a U-shaped or crescent cutout in the seat, show up independently across Babylon, Greece, and Rome. Babylonian birthing chairs date back even further than the Egyptian evidence, and similar squatting or kneeling postures appear in traditional practices across parts of Africa, the Americas, and Asia, entirely independent of one another. The physician Cyrannus of Ephesus described obstetric chairs in careful detail nearly 2,000 years ago. Statues from Mesoamerica depict goddesses giving birth upright. Temple carvings from ancient Egypt itself, showing royal births, consistently depict women kneeling or squatting, never lying flat. When researchers say upright birth was close to a universal human default, they mean it in the most literal sense. It kept showing up everywhere, regardless of whether those cultures ever had any contact at all. And there was real logic behind it, not just tradition. Squatting and kneeling let gravity assist the baby's descent instead of working against it. They open the pelvis wider than a reclined position does. Modern research bears this out directly. One review of the research found that women delivering in a kneeling position were roughly 94% less likely to suffer severe tearing compared to those lying on their backs. Lying flat has also been shown to reduce how far the pelvis can actually open by a measurable margin, which helps explain both the longer labors and the higher rate of surgical intervention associated with the reclined position. So if upright birth was the near universal global default and it holds up under modern scrutiny, why does almost none of that survive in how most hospital births happen today? The shift traces back to 17th century France. In 1668, physician François Morisot published an influential book arguing that a reclined position was more comfortable for the mother, and, not incidentally, far more convenient for the physician attending her. Around the same period, a popular story took hold that King Louis XIV insisted women lie flat during childbirth simply so he could get a better view while watching. Historians now treat the Louis story as exaggerated, more legend than documented fact, but the exaggeration points at something real underneath it. Male physicians, newly entering a role that midwives had held almost exclusively for centuries, increasingly preferred a position that gave them easier access and a clearer line of sight, whatever the woman in labor might have preferred. This wasn't purely about one book or one king either. Across the 17th and 18th centuries, childbirth was gradually shifting from a female run domain, overseen almost entirely by midwives, into a domain increasingly claimed by university trained male doctors. Access and visibility mattered enormously to that transition. A physician who could see and reach the birth easily had an easier claim to authority over it than a midwife working the traditional way, even when the traditional way was working just fine. From there, the reclined position spread across the medical establishment. English physicians favored delivering with the mother on her side. By the 1830s, an American obstetrics chairman at the University of Pennsylvania was recommending a fully flat position as the new institutional standard. As childbirth moved out of the home and into hospitals over the following century, and as forceps and other interventions became more common, the position that made a physician's job easiest simply calcified into the normal way to give birth. Medical textbooks reinforce the new standard generation after generation, and once something is taught in every medical school as simply how birth is done, it stops looking like a choice at all. Few expectant mothers in the 20th century were ever told there had been any alternative, let alone that the alternative had been the default for most of recorded history. None of this means ancient birth was safe by modern standards. Infection, blood loss, and obstructed labor claimed lives regardless of what position a woman delivered in, and no birthing brick or chair could substitute for antibiotics or emergency surgery when something went seriously wrong. Maternal and infant mortality were genuinely high across the ancient world, for reasons no birthing position alone could fix. But the specific act of lying flat on your back to deliver a baby isn't some universal biological default that ancient women simply hadn't figured out yet. If anything, it's the position ancient midwifery had almost entirely moved away from, for reasons that held up under modern research. Today, birthing centers and a growing number of hospitals are quietly bringing upright positions back, sometimes using equipment that looks remarkably close to a Roman obstetric chair or an Egyptian birth brick. Some midwifery programs now teach upright delivery as a specific, deliberate skill again, essentially relearning techniques that had simply gone quiet in mainstream practice rather than ever being disproven. It took roughly 300 years, and a fair amount of research confirming what a birth brick from 1700 BC had already assumed, to circle back to where most of the ancient world already stood. Just like this channel's look at ancient partying, bathing, labor, and justice, the pattern here holds again. The specific version of normal most people assume has always existed usually turns out to be a much more recent invention than expected, adopted for reasons that had little to do with what actually worked best. If a story like this is exactly the kind of thing you want more of, hit subscribe. This has been Unbound Frontier.